Chicago police changing how they conduct search warrants after an 18-month CBS 2 investigation exposed officers repeatedly raiding innocent families' homes.
Yeah, the mom of these children says it's not nearly enough. CBS 2 investigator Dave Savini showed her newly uncovered body camera footage of her bad raid.
It's 8:30 at night.
I see lights.
You're inside a police car on Chicago's South Side.
We're sneaking.
A team of officers zeroes in on a house. 14 heavily armed cops.
Swing up.
On the hunt for a heroin dealer with the street name Peanut.
Door's locked.
Did anybody knock?
No.
Good.
They just came in?
Search warrant, Chicago police! Door's open. Go in. Watch the right.
But they are breaking into the wrong home. And all they find are innocent children.
They had guns to our faces.
14-year-old Savannah in the purple shirt hits the ground. You are looking at the back end of a high-powered rifle.
No! I'm not going to this again! Shut up.
Lying next to her, still in his school uniform, is her 7-year-old brother, JJ. He was stunned at the sight of an assault rifle.
And they had their finger on a trigger.
Clear in there.
In another room, their 11-year-old sister, Talia, is face down, surrounded by more weapons. Their mother, Crystal Archie, watches for the first time what happened to her children. She was on her way home from work when the raid happened back in April of 2019.
Relax.
Please do not shoot me, please.
You're fine.
You know who's on the floor right there? Can you tell who's on the floor?
My daughter is on the floor. I can hear her. I can hear her yelling. I can hear her yelling. And you just see the guns at the back of her head.
Her oldest child, Savannah, was babysitting.
Come on, get up.
They're handling heavy artillery. It would have taken one slip of your finger, and my children would not be here.
We don't want to see that happen. We don't want to erode the trust with the community.
Now, for the first time, Chicago police are talking about the disturbing trend the CBS 2 investigators exposed, which includes more than 23 children who say police pointed guns at them during wrong raids.
Where did they point the gun at you?
I wanted to like right here, but like straight at it.
Where did they point the rifle?
It was like around.
They pointed a gun at me.
When you saw some of the stories, what did you feel for some of these kids?
Based on the way that the footage was, you felt bad for them.
Chicago Police Lieutenant Matthew Klein and Risk Manager Michelle Morris.
Let's be clear, no child should have a gun pointed in his face.
They say the department is now adding training for officers to deal with children and creating a new search warrant policy aimed at protecting kids from trauma during raids.
How are you going to deal with children?
We're making sure that if we know children to be present, that in our operational planning, that it's discussed that there's going to be children in here.
What good is the plan if the officer, the affiant who's getting the warrant, hasn't independently verified, double-checked and triple-checked the informant's information to make sure you're actually going into the right apartment or the right home?
Are there some that are not being done to the standards that we have? Absolutely, and that's being addressed.
Lieutenant Klein says there will be more oversight of the search warrant approval process, including a requirement mandating all officers run the proper public record checks through their information center at police headquarters to make sure they are raiding the right addresses.
Things fell through the cracks and they didn't realize that that was the proper way to obtain this information.
Repeated failures to get addresses right, leaving behind a trail of trauma.
This is the saddest moment.
And still, the city is refusing to track these wrong raids, covering up just how big the problem really is. The little bit of data the CBS 2 investigators forced the city to release shows since 2016, police executed 6,800 search warrants. In nearly 3,000 cases, not a single arrest was made. We can't tell you how many of those 3,000 were wrong raids because tonight, even with the new policy in place, They admit they still have no method to track these kinds of wrong raids.
Are you creating any kind of a database for that, for those types of raids?
It has not currently been contemplated, but I mean, it might be in the future.
And while they still won't track all the wrong raids, there are changes requiring body cameras are rolling from start to finish at every single new raid.
It must be on the entire time.
At what point in the raid are they supposed to turn them off?
When they leave.
Which brings us back to the Archie raid, where we found the raid team cut their body cameras off after only 3 minutes. In fact, police stopped recording right after the cameras captured something happening to the children that's not only outrageous, it might even be illegal.
Hey, just tell us, do you know where the stuff's at? Because if you can tell us that, then we're out of here.
And with no parent present,
Over here. Have a seat. Hold your hands like your sister. No, like this. Hold your hands like this. All three of you.
continue questioning.
Any drugs? You know of any drugs that he sells?
Remember, this is the wrong house, and they never even heard of the guy named in the warrant.
So he stopped selling out of here? He stopped keeping it here? Who? Whoever keeps it here? We never had it.
The children say the interrogation continued, followed by a search of the home. But there's no body camera video of that because the sergeant in charge gave this order.
If everybody's secure, we can kill cameras.
The kids say when the police left, they told them they would return.
And there was a real fear from the children that they might come back.
Absolutely. I've literally walked into the apartment and I just cried. And there's no way to feel about going home. And that's my life now.
3 weeks after that raid, police raided the family's home again. We can't show you what happened that time because we are told none of those officers used body cameras. It's been 10 months since those raids, and no one from Internal Affairs or the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, the agency that investigates police misconduct, has reached out to interview Crystal Archie or her kids. The Archies filed a federal lawsuit against CPD about 6 months ago.
So, Dave, this federal lawsuit, it's filed at least 6 months ago. Shouldn't that trigger a COPA investigation?
Historically, that is supposed to trigger a COPA investigation. They aren't commenting, but if they haven't already started an investigation, I'm sure after they just saw what happened here, there's one underway right now.
Yeah, 18 months, CPD has not talked to you. They finally did tonight and completely overhauled their procedures. Good work, Dave.
More work to be done, though.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Dave.
you. The CBS 2 investigators have been exposing Chicago police, breaking down doors, pointing guns at children and parents while raiding homes of innocent families. 51 allegations of wrong raids uncovered so far in the past few years. Now, even more disturbing details from inside houses as body cameras record video, then suddenly stop. Here's CBS 2 investigator Dave Savini. Dave.
Erica, police are required to keep their body cameras rolling during raids from start to finish. But we found a sergeant repeatedly telling his team to kill all body cameras long before the raids were over. And now innocent families who had their homes ransacked want justice.
Get your hands up. There's a baby in here.
Tony Tate had just changed into her nightgown when police suddenly swarmed her apartment.
They just came in with guns drawn.
She feared the officers might mistake the shiny metal object in her hand for something dangerous.
I got a spoon in my hand.
She says she was terrified when she saw guns pointed at her two daughters.
Is anybody else in here?
Her oldest daughter, Sierra, was holding her baby sister.
When he pointed his gun at me still, I had covered her like this.
On the ground.
Tate's son, Christopher, was ordered to the floor with a rifle to his head.
What's going on? What's going on?
You were worried about him?
Yes.
Body camera footage like this is crucial in understanding what really goes on during these raids.
Bust it. CPD search warrant.
From the very beginning to their forced entry to once inside. Critical footage revealing what happens to innocent people as police are once again caught on their own cameras raiding another wrong home. This time they're looking for a suspected drug dealer who never lived here and that the Tates had never heard of.
What's going
We were both handcuffed for about almost an hour.
Innocent people handcuffed.
Yes.
Ouch, this hurts. You're right.
But we can't show you everything that happened to her and her family during the entire raid and search that followed, because see this sergeant in the red shirt? That's Sergeant Anthony Bruno. Listen as he gives this order.
Let's go to cameras.
Kill cameras! Kill cameras!
Bruno gave the kill cameras order after recording only 2.5 minutes of the raid inside the house. What appears to be a complete violation of Chicago Police Department body camera policy.
Kill cameras!
They all kill their cameras. Except
Sheila Betty, a law professor at Northwestern University, is involved in consent decree negotiations mandating Chicago police reforms related to misconduct and use of excessive force.
Policy could not be more clear. They had to have their cameras on.
Doors open, go in, watch the right.
Just 4 months earlier, Bruno and a raid team were caught doing the same exact thing during another wrong raid. You're looking at the back end of a high-powered rifle as 3 innocent children drop to the floor.
Please do not shoot me, please.
You're fine, you're fine. Come on, get up. Get up. Get up.
After terrifying a 7-year-old, an 11-year-old, and their 14-year-old sister with weapons,
Have a seat. Hold your hands like your sister.
police began interrogating them without a parent present.
Hey, just tell us, do you know where the stuff's at? Because if you can tell us that, then we're out of here.
The children say this interrogation continued, but you won't see any of that because once again, only minutes into the raid, you can hear Sergeant Bruno again give the same order.
If everybody's secure, we can kill cameras.
Okay.
Okay.
Betty also says Bruno's team broke the law when they interrogated the children.
So we stopped selling out of here? We stopped keeping it here?
Who?
Whoever keeps it here?
We never had it.
The only reason, the only justification for cutting off cameras in this kind of a situation is some sort of cover-up, right? Or is some sort of recognition that they made a bad call. They don't need further documentation of it.
Despite all the millions the city spent on equipping thousands of officers with body cameras, Bruno repeatedly gave the kill cameras order before the raids were over, making the body-worn camera policy worthless. Neither Bruno nor his teams were disciplined for either raid.
It's critically important that Chicago police officers who violate policies like the body cam policy are held accountable. Those policies, or else the policies are meaningless. They're not worth the paper they're written on.
Right, can we know what's...
Body cameras were supposed to create transparency, uncover misconduct, and build trust with the public. But watch how fast that trust erodes as Tate's husband returns from work and learns about the raid.
What's going on? I just did 2 16-hour shifts, plus I got a second job. Whoever told y'all about we selling drugs or whatever, that's bullshit. Honestly.
Officers tell him a different story about how his family was being treated.
They're all good. They're sitting on their couch. No one's in handcuffs, nothing like that.
Police tell him they're all good and no one's in handcuffs.
Sit there, trade.
That's not what the body cams show.
And I'm going to stand right here and tell my, like my sister said.
Tate's brother also showed up and reminded cops that people are fed up with all their wrong raids.
Police always kick in doors with search warrants and they don't even be the crib they looking for, bro. It happens. It happens. You don't.
What do you want to say to the police department?
Just get your information correct before you just come in on innocent families.
Both families are suing CPD. Chicago police say they are now investigating Sergeant Bruno and what happened on these raids. But the attorney for the wrong raid victims, Al Holfeld Jr., says neither family has ever been contacted to be part of any investigation by CPD or the Civilian Office of Police Accountability. 51 wrong raid cases and counting. The tips just keep coming in.
Oh, they certainly do. And so this sergeant, you've been asking questions about him for a while, but this is the first indication that they're investigating.
We've been asking, and not until tonight did they say, or last night did they say that they are finally officially investigating him. So
all right.
Hopefully this goes somewhere and they get to the root of the problem.
Yes, thank you, Dave.
Tonight, a powerful demand sent to the city, an enforcement action calling for Chicago police to stop raiding the wrong homes and violating citizens' civil rights.
This action from a team of lawyers who fought for the federal consent decree. It comes after a 2-year probe by CBS 2 investigator Dave Savini.
Through this door?
Yes, yes.
And then they came right up on you?
Yes, yes.
And they had guns?
Yes.
And you had your granddaughter in your arms?
Like this exactly.
Kame Lazar held her 4-year-old granddaughter, Leilina, as a heavily armed team of Chicago police officers, captured here by a security camera, charged into their apartment building,
busting through doors and raiding their home in February.
And I was praying. I was praying my rosary, and I scarf in my head, and I hear, noise.
They were sitting just feet from the door, deep in prayer, when police came barreling in.
This door, they opened very hard, push.
A confidential informant told officers Lazar's 33-year-old son had a handgun without the required firearm owner's identification card.
They had a search warrant.
Yeah.
But she says her son doesn't even live here. He lives in California, and if police would have investigated the tip, they might have avoided raiding another wrong home and pointing guns at another innocent family, including a child.
Do you think they knew there was a child in here?
No.
Okay, because they're supposed to now make sure if there's children here.
Yes.
CPD is still continuing to break into families' homes, point guns at little kids. CPD continues to treat kids, black and brown families, like they're less than human.
Craig Futterman is part of a team of lawyers who forced sweeping reforms in the Chicago Police Department through a federal court order aimed at stopping excessive use of force.
You can't have a consent decree in Chicago that's supposed to address patterns and practices of police violence, and then the same old thing keeps going on.
Futterman just sent this 14-page demand to the city and enforcement action, repeatedly citing what the CBS 2 investigators uncovered, a disturbing pattern of wrong raids in Chicago's black and brown neighborhoods.
Chicago Police Certified!
It demands police stop violating the 2019 court-ordered consent decree and add new policies to protect families from abusive, discriminatory raids.
Get in the ground!
You are violating this decree, you're violating the Constitution, you're violating the law. Stop.
The demand for action accuses CPD of continuing to inflict unreasonable and excessive force, including in the presence of children and their caregivers.
Did they point the guns at you? They did?
It cites all of the wrong raids CBS 2 uncovered since we started our probe 2 years ago, revealing guns repeatedly pointed at kids.
They had their finger on a trigger.
Including high-powered rifles like the one pointed at this 7-year-old and his 14-year-old sister last year.
Please do not shoot me.
You're fine.
You don't terrorize innocent families. You don't point guns at little kids.
What was your reaction when you saw guns pointed at those children?
Rage. You're talking about traumatizing. Trauma, real trauma, to kids when they're that age. You don't just recover and get over that.
Futterman also is demanding CPD stop targeting black and brown families,
Search warrant, Chicago Police! Doors open, go in, watch the right.
citing what we found after battling CPD for more than a year to get search warrant records the department tried to keep secret. Digging through CPD's own data from 2016 to 2019, we found they almost never raid white neighborhoods. The neighborhoods with the most raids were almost entirely all black or Latino.
We the targets, black people.
What the whole consent decree is about, it's about patterns and practices of police violence in Chicago directed at black and brown folks.
Patterns of corruption dating back decades, costing taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars.
I exercise my Fifth Amendment right.
From Commander John Burgess' torture to the mass corruption inside a special operations unit and interrogations that were kept off the books inside Homan Square to the killing of Laquan McDonald and cover-up. After McDonald's murder, the U.S. Justice Department launched an investigation and confirmed that pattern existed, findings that led to a consent decree mandating police reforms and the required use of body cameras. But the latest demand for enforcement delivered to the city today cites case after case uncovered by the CBS 2 investigators, where cameras were either not worn, turned on too late, or shut off too soon. Watch as this sergeant, just 2 minutes into a raid last summer, orders his team to kill cameras.
Hey, if everybody's secure, we can kill cameras.
After CBS 2 exposed the misuse of body cameras, the city said in January all raids must have at least 2 officers with body cameras rolling at all times. But 1 month later, when Kameh Lazar's apartment was raided, the only video we know exists is from her security cameras.
No sign that there was a body camera on the inside of the apartment.
The family's attorney, Al Hofeld Jr., who now represents dozens of children whose homes were wrongly raided, says no body cams means no evidence of gun pointing and other alleged mistreatment.
There should be a strict prohibition or mandate that officers not point their firearms at children.
How about we wear body cams? How about every officer who is involved in raiding a family's home is wearing a body camera, and that they have it on and they keep it on throughout the entire raid? We're trying to stop this. We're trying to do what CBS has really done by blowing this up and making it visible for the world to see.
So why doesn't it stop? In Futterman's demands to the city, he blames absence of accountability. To date, CPD has failed to discipline any officer for their conduct during any of the abusive raids reported by CBS.
Just rampant, unchecked police abuse, the lack of police accountability is hurting the entire city. And the lack of police accountability also just eviscerates any kind of a trust.
In fact, our analysis of CPD's own data reveals the top 12 officers who led the most negative raids when nothing was found and no arrest was made racked up a combined 446 citizen complaints. 87 were use of force complaints. Not a single one was sustained. Zero. One of those officers was part of the team that raided Kameh Lazar's home.
They flipped the bed?
Yeah, they do like this.
No gun was found and no arrests were made. They didn't even notice they were on camera until they already left.
How do you feel about the police?
I don't feel comfortable. I scared.
You're scared?
Yeah, I scared.
The enforcement action breaks down a list of demands for CPD. Among them are making sure officers check to see if any children are there before raiding a home, creating a system to track every time they enter the wrong place, and disciplining officers when they do get it wrong so it doesn't happen again. If the city doesn't comply with these demands, the attorneys say they'll take CPD back to federal court. Dave Savini, CBS 2 Investigators.
Now to a CBS 2 investigation and new video we've obtained of a raid Chicago police conducted at the wrong home this past February. It highlights yet again the inconsistencies in CPD policies and practices when it comes to body cameras, an issue that boiled up this week after police shot a man in Inglewood, touching off a night of violent protests and looting. Here's CBS 2 investigator Dave Savini.
We will not tolerate that.
That's Mayor Lori Lightfoot talking tough this summer about cops who violate the Chicago Police Department's body camera policy.
If you are one of those officers, we will find you, we will identify you, and we will strip you of your police powers. Period.
But the CBS 2 investigators have found officers failing to obey body camera rules get little or no discipline. No punishment for those we exposed violating the body cam policy while raiding the wrong homes.
You're fine.
Do you remember what the police did to that door?
They knocked that door off.
They knocked it off?
That thing.
You won't see any body cam video from the moment police broke in and confronted this 4-year-old and her grandmother, Sharon Lyons, with weapons in February.
And that's when they had the machine guns and whatever guns them was, they was in my face. They come in.
They can only describe what happened because police didn't record that part of the raid.
Just like this.
Watch your back.
Tonight, we obtained footage from the only part of the raid they did record. It's from cameras worn by patrol officers who showed up later, after all the damage was done.
Who wouldn't be so upset? I'm sick as hell.
You can hear Sharon Lyons, who was suffering from the flu that night, also complaining about how police raided the wrong home again.
Y'all always got a search warrant, but y'all always kicking down the wrong door.
Number one is if you're going to have a body camera deployment, you have to have rules, and the rules have to mean something.
David Harris is a law professor who works with other cities to help improve policies. He also teaches about police behavior, search warrant use, and body camera use. He says discipline for violating the rules is critical.
And it's not just a matter of settling lawsuits and writing checks. You are poisoning the potential for any kind of good relationship to come out of the consent decree and any reforms there might be. So this goes right to the heart of what I think we'd like to see the Chicago Police Department become.
And just this week, body camera video could have been key evidence in the police-involved shooting of 20-year-old Latrell Allen. But CPD never issued the officers involved body cams. This shooting sparked anger in Inglewood and led to more distrust and clashing in the streets. Officers say Allen shot at them with his gun, so they returned fire.
The police officers where you're standing, and Latrell is down here?
Yeah.
But this woman, who says she witnessed the shooting, says Allen had no gun and had his arms up when police fired.
He was running from him, and he stood right here, the officer, and just kept shooting at him.
There's talk that there was a gun recovered.
No, he didn't have any gun. He didn't have anything. He was crying, asking the officer. He had his hands up, like, why you keep shooting me?
The city says the officers involved in the shooting were part of a newly created community safety team. CPD has more than 7,500 body-worn cameras, but not a single one given to this new team. Again, critical evidence never recorded.
So it's not a perfect technology by any means, but it does establish certain facts beyond dispute.
They shot him 5 times.
But with no body camera video to review, the Civilian Office of Police Accountability is now asking the public to come forward with any video evidence from any cameras in the area that might have recorded the shooting. Along with the community safety team, the CBS 2 investigators exposed other police units not wearing body cameras, including gang, gun, narcotics, and SWAT teams.
I thought they was gonna shoot me and my brother.
Like this gang unit that raided a child's birthday party last year. We found the only existing video is from a nearby building security camera showing the 17 armed officers headed to the raid.
How were they holding them?
Like this.
We've learned through federal court records the city just settled a civil rights violation case with the family from the birthday raid. But there are several wrong raid lawsuits still out there involving SWAT teams that recorded no video.
What were they saying? Come out with your hands up. They say walk, keep your hands up.
Like the raid at Dominique Wilson's home. And the raid on Ebony Tate's family. The only video Tate has is from a neighbor's cell phone camera.
There's no reason that SWAT teams can't use them too. None.
Given the mounting lawsuits and community distrust, Harris says CPD needs to make reforms, wear body cameras, and hold officers accountable.
If they don't mean anything, the citizens of your town are justified in feeling like, why did we spend this money? Why were we told that we were going to have greater accountability through cameras?
Dave Savini, CBS 2 Investigators.
Chicago police say they are working to have specialized teams equipped with body-worn cameras. That is part of the 2021 budget.
Now to a CBS Investigators exclusive. A judge running from our questions about the bad warrant he signed, giving Chicago police the power to raid an innocent family's home. It's one of dozens of bad search warrants judges are rubber stamping with no proof police got it right. Here's CBS 2 investigator Dave Savini with the part of the wrong raid story you haven't yet heard.
Judge Arujo, why are you running? The man wearing the fedora and trench coat running from our questions.
Judge, we just want to talk to you about all the negative warrants you signed.
Is the Cook County judge who signed the bad warrant to raid this woman's home.
I didn't know if they were police officers or if they were somebody just ambushing my house to rob me. There were some of them that had masks on their face.
It was February 2018. Mary Ann Sparr's house was ransacked. The emotional damage even worse.
The one police officer looked at me and said, "Shut your face before I handcuff you and slam your face to the floor."
Mary Ann's children were terrorized. Her 16-year-old son was upstairs asleep in his bed.
A police officer jumped on his bed, put a gun to his head, and said, "Don't you move, I'll shoot you in your head."
Meanwhile, she says her daughter, who has a disability, was naked in the bathroom.
The male officer flung the door open as she was getting out of the bathtub. It's terrible that my daughter was violated that way in her home. She doesn't even feel safe to be home alone.
The man you see running is Judge Mauricio Arujo. He was supposed to make sure police had enough proof of criminal activity before giving the officers the power to raid her home.
They came in your home, they searched the rooms, they ransacked everything, they broke things, and then they left.
Correct.
Nobody arrested.
Nope, nothing.
Another bad raid.
Search warrant, Chicago police!
Just like the bad raids all these families suffered, whose stories we've been telling over the past 2 years.
Chicago police! Get down!
In each case, we uncovered judges signing search warrants full of holes.
Please do not shoot me, please.
The only so-called facts coming from confidential informants who often get paid for tips or are criminals looking to cut a deal. One of those warrants, based only on an informant's word, led to this traumatizing wrong raid on the Mendez family. The day before, cops had caught a man with drugs on the street and turned him into an informant to find more drugs.
They live upstairs. They live upstairs.
But the informant's tip was wrong, and the warrant shows officers didn't do anything to verify it. No surveillance, nothing. Yet another Cook County judge rubber-stamped it, signed it without any corroborating evidence. The city got sued, and the officer who got the warrant had this to say during a deposition with the Mendez family attorney.
Did Judge ask you any questions about your complaint for search warrant or any of the information in your complaint?
No.
Judges are supposed to see the red flags, make sure there's credible evidence of a crime, and protect the rights of citizens like these families from having their homes wrongfully raided.
When we see data like what you're describing, it does give pause and it gives concern that there is a systemic issue there.
Sharon Fairley is a former federal prosecutor and former head of COPA, the Civilian Office of Police Accountability. She says judges really need to make sure police independently investigate and verify informant tips.
When someone's getting paid for something, right, then they have an incentive, right, to give law enforcement the information that they think that the law enforcement wants to hear.
Which is why she says the judge's role is critical. They're the only thing that stands between police and your front door, protecting your Fourth Amendment rights against illegal search and seizure.
As the sort of gatekeeper, the judge should be looking for that additional corroborative evidence.
Judge, can you answer a couple questions for me? I just want to know why you've signed off on so many search warrants.
Which brings us back to Judge Arujo. Our CBS 2 investigative team tried to catch up with him about Marianne Sparr's raid and all of the other bad warrants he signed.
Come on, Judge, these families depended on you.
Officer Banyan Chinchilla got Judge Arujo to approve the Sparr warrant, once again based solely on the tip of an informant. And there appear to be a lot of bad tips. In fact, the most recent CPD data turned over to us shows the vast majority of all search warrants signed by judges target drugs. In 95% of those raids, they came up empty. A dismal success rate, calling into question whether some judges are simply rubber stamping warrants based on the word of a John Doe.
Just the whole process is corrupted.
Attorney Ed Fox sued the city on behalf of the Sparr family.
Police knew this was a judge that they could go to anytime.
They went to him a lot.
And police data we uncovered backs that up. Our CBS 2 investigators found Judge Arujo was Officer Chinchilla's go-to judge for search warrants, signing more than half of Chinchilla's 98 warrants during a 3-year period. Chicago police data also reveals Judge Arujo signed more warrants than any other judge, 1,166 in 3 years. No other judge comes close.
Judge shopping?
Yes, that's where you go to a judge where you feel comfortable, you're more likely to get the warrant that you want.
To make matters worse, no one in the court system is keeping track of how often cops, their informants, and judges get it wrong.
Judge!
And that takes our chase from the streets of Chicago to South America. It was Judge Arujo who had to testify about these 2 disgraced cops and all the warrants he signed that they used to raid and rob people. Officer David Salgado and Sergeant Xavier Elizondo were convicted. At their trial, Judge Arujo confirmed all 3 of them went to Salgado's bachelor party in Colombia.
Judge Arujo, these families depended on you to protect them.
I feel so bad that my children had to go through that. I mean, you traumatized my children, violated my family.
The city settled the Sparr family lawsuit. After Judge Arujo's bad warrants with the 2 officers were exposed, the chief judge changed the system, randomly assigning judges to sign warrants. But CPD's data still shows some judges signing more than others, and we found still no one tracks the judges who signed bad warrants. One day after we tried questioning Arujo, he resigned. At the time, he was also on trial for unrelated misconduct complaints by the State Judicial Inquiry Board. Dave Savini, CBS 2 Investigators.